Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us with Climate Action Network for our event today. Happy spring and happy Earth Day. Today, we have a panel coming to you to talk about solar related to the real estate transaction. My name is Jessica Klein, and I'm an agent with eXp, and I'm also a member of the Climate Action Network, eXp Can. In addition to being a member of Climate Action Network, I want you to know that I am a real estate agent who's worked with solar in our transactions, and I also became a solar consultant in 2022. Just a quick note, this session will be recorded and live streamed on our workplace, in the world, and also on YouTube Live. Wherever you're watching today, please drop questions in the chat bar on the platform you're watching in, and we will monitor those questions and we will rotate through the questions for our panelists as they come in. If you have questions, just remember to put them there and we may come back to them at the end. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to do a quick shout out about Climate Action Network. For those of you who don't know about eXp Can, our group launched in July of 2022. We're a community of eXp agents, staff, and partners who are enthusiastic about caring for the environment. Our goal is to provide a space to network, educate, collaborate, and inspire climate action on all levels. When you join eXp Can, we have opportunities for leadership, graphic design, content creation for events like we're doing today, event coordination, project management, green buildings, sustainability, corporate governance, and more. Our mission is to make eXp Realty a global leader in sustainability and climate action. So on the screen, you'll see the link. If you are an eXp agent, this is the link where you can follow us and join Climate Action Network. Alex, can you show the next slide? Thanks. So today we are talking about solar education for realtors. Now, this is going to be a very conversational style panelist event, but I just wanted to share a few statistics before we jump into this about why we're talking about this today. Solar has become an issue in our transactions to the extent that it has been added to contracts, addendums, disclosures, and all kinds of our procedures in recent years. A lot of realtors have not come across a solar transaction yet, but when they do, we find that they have a lot of questions. So our goal today was to answer some of those questions so you can be ready for this. And I gathered some data today just to share with you how big of a trend this really is. In 2020, 3.7% of U.S. single-family homes generated from solar systems. And in 2022, Pew Research did a study that found 8% of homeowners said they have already installed solar panels. And what's even more interesting, an additional 39% had given serious thought to it in the past year. So that's a pretty big percentage. Even larger, in the Pacific region, 45% said they've given serious thought to it. And in the mountain region, 51% said they've either given serious thought into installing solar or already have done it. So if you haven't seen this come up in your transactions yet, it is something that you might see. Next, I'd like to introduce our panelists, tell you a little bit about them, and give them a chance to talk to you a little bit about the insight they bring to our topic today. We have a diverse group of panelists that bring unique perspectives, and we're so glad that each of you could join us. First, I'd like to introduce Josh Wallet. Josh is the president of the National Association of Appraisers and the principal consultant for Wallet Solutions. He provides consulting, on compliance, valuation, education, review, and investigations. And his clients include lending institution, appraisers, appraisal management company, attorneys, and education providers. Josh also creates education on a regular basis around these topics. Josh, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brings you to our panel today?
Yes, thank you very much, Jessica. I appreciate being here. Appreciate being part of the discussion. A lot of the time, I know we're joined with a lot of real estate agents today, and sometimes there's a disconnect between appraisers and real estate agents, and really there should be an ongoing conversation about all things related to properties, not just solar, but all sorts of characteristics of properties. And I'm a residential appraiser out of Western Colorado, so we do have some solar here, a lot of sunny days, although today is not one of them as it works out. But I do like to keep the conversation open on a lot of different issues, because that's just really how we end up learning. And so it's not just taking a look and watching one YouTube or reading one article, but it's really talking with a lot of the local people. So I hope this type of conversation here then continues out across the country with a lot of the local practitioners. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. And I think you make a great point that this is an ongoing conversation.
For sure.
Next, I'd like to introduce Pamela Brookstein. Pamela manages the Value for High Performing Homes program at Elevate, a nonprofit. She has expertise engaging various sectors of the real estate community. She works to design messaging to realtor groups, and she actually teaches several classes surrounding high-performing homes and solar for realtors. She travels around the country and often teaches these classes through local boards. Pamela, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. I do work for Elevate, which is a nonprofit based in the city of Chicago, though we have staff nationally. And at our very core, we design and implement energy efficiency programs. My job there is to try to make sure that the real estate community consistently and fairly values high performing, so energy efficient and solar homes. And part of this work, I get to do consumer research. So I run focus groups with homeowners and real estate agents to see what people are thinking on these topics and what would get them to think more about energy efficiency when they buy a home. And then I also, as Jessica said, I get to teach real estate agents, which is my very, very favorite thing to do. And I taught several hundred real estate agents last year, and I'm starting out strong this year again. And we talk about solar and energy efficiency.
Thank you, Pamela. Next, I'd like to introduce Marisa Fletcher. Marisa is also part of our eXp family, eXp California. She's a licensed real estate broker and an independent certified solar broker for more than 20 years. She serves the Inland Empire and surrounding communities. And Marisa is also a green certified realtor to help homeowners make the best decisions around their energy needs. Marisa, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, I will. Thank you so much, Jessica, for the intro. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Marisa Fletcher. I am a real estate broker and also an independent solar consultant. And the way that I got into solar was actually through real estate. I'm in sunny, good old California. And just a quick stat, we've got the most solar installed here in California. Texas is second. And California has twice the amount that Texas has. So we see a lot of solar transactions out here in California. And there was a big disconnect, again, just like Pamela mentioned, between realtors and solar. Also, like Josh mentioned, with the appraisers and solar and how to value solar homes, or how do agents list those homes. So I added solar to my real estate business and real estate brokerage about 4 years ago. And I've been helping real estate professionals as well, teach them not only in their transactions, but the benefits of solar and how to make it make sense for their homeowners. So that's what I bring.
Thank you, Marisa. And you make some excellent points. I think there are some disconnects in some areas that we're not sure about. And then realtors realize, okay, solar is becoming a bigger thing. California is definitely leading the way. So when we put this group together today and the topic, we really wanted realtors to come away with this with some things that they know now. So when they come across a transaction or a contract that involves solar, they know the right questions to ask and some ways to help their client. I do want to point out there are a lot of documents that are state specific. So we will be covering a very general level right now. And of course, we're also an international company, and this is a worldwide issue. But we have a lot of viewers today from the US and Canada. So we won't be diving into like a specific addendum that they created for Arizona today. But I would like to take the focus that we first look at the perspective of a home buyer who sees a house advertised and they are going with their realtor and the house has solar. And then after that, we'll move into the perspective from the seller. They've made these upgrades to their home and they have solar. What are some things they do to list their home? And then I'd like to wrap up with a discussion around some of the pricing and valuation questions. So as I mentioned, if you have a question, do drop it in the chat box. And I'd like to start out with a question, and we'll start with Pamela Brookstein. What are some documents that a buyer should review when considering purchasing a home that includes solar?
So I would definitely want to see a copy of the performance monitoring report to look at how that system has been performing in the past. And of course, that's no guarantee of the future, but at least you can get an idea of how long they've been running that system and how much it's producing. And I would actually also want to see what that home, what those owners are using in energy costs, just to see kind of where it pairs. And I totally understand that one person living in a home uses a completely different amount of cooling and heating than another person does, but just to get a general idea of what that household is using. So the performance monitoring report, number one. And then I would also ask for all the warranties for the inverter, for the panels. I'd want to find out if there was any maintenance done on that system as well. And I think that puts you into a really good place as a buyer to start understanding what you might be buying.
Thank you. I think you make a really good point. You know, one person uses a lot less electricity usually than like a family of four. Pamela, could you elaborate a little bit about what the performance monitoring report is?
Yeah, sorry about that. So each solar system, when you get a solar system, whoever the installer is, they will have some sort of app that you can use that is tracking what each of your panels is doing. If you have friends out there who have solar and social media and they're posting images of how much solar they created on a certain day, or they are showing you how many trees they saved from being cut down, that is from the app, their performance monitoring app. And that's the best way to get an idea of what's going on with that system. So it can live on a laptop and on a phone and can be printed out.
Thank you, Pamela. And Marisa, I'd like to ask if you have some other things you'd like to add to documents that the buyer should look at and information when they're thinking about buying a house with solar.
Yes, thank you for that question, Jessica. And Pamela had perfect answers, but in addition to those things that Pamela already mentioned, I'd ask for the solar contract, the original solar contract and that paperwork, so they could see what size system that was originally, how many panels, the equipment, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, besides the contracts and the paperwork, what I would do on a buyer side, I want them to know that buying a home with solar is a good idea, especially in Southern California where I'm at, where it's really, really hot. So I will generally have buyer clients ask the seller or ask the seller or the listing agent for a copy of the most recent true up bill from their utility company. So I asked a copy of a true up bill. The reason why is I want to see or give that buyer an example of what a true up bill would look like at the end of the year. Again, each family is going to have different energy needs, but at least if I'm getting a true up bill and it's showing at the end of the year that this seller only had to pay $100 or they had a credit of $100 on this size home with this amount, on this square footage, that may be beneficial to those buyers, especially knowing what utility bills kind of look like out here in Southern California already without solar. So that's probably a couple more things that I'd ask for.
Thank you. I think that's a great idea to look at a true-up bill or the information from the electric utility, especially for the grid-tied solar systems. We should point out 99% of the time we are talking about a grid-tied solar system without getting too technical. If you have an off-grid solar system, there won't be a true-up. And I think we should also point out that different utilities might call the true-up something different, and they may have a net metering rollover program without getting too into the weeds. But those are great ideas to look at their once a year true-up bill. Josh, from the appraisal perspective, are there documents that you think the buyer should be ready to look at that maybe the seller should also be providing to the appraiser?
Yes, yeah, that's a really good question. A lot of the time when an appraiser is scheduling to go out to a home or is at the home, there's not necessarily information that either they're asking for or there's not information being provided to them. And so really providing a lot of the information that we've heard here is useful. And I would just go into a little bit of detail. We're talking about the solar contract. Let's figure out what the original cost was. We can also take a look at what the current cost is, what the age of it is. Obviously, if we see the contract and we see records, we're going to understand that. Taking a look at utility bills. So we've heard the true up report. Yeah, that does, I would guess goes by different names. I haven't heard of that particular report, but taking a look at the different utility bills, taking a look at a year of utility bills to really see, one, how does it compare to other homes? And as I think it was Pamela that mentioned, it's going to be apples to oranges to some degree, but it does give you a starting place, right? To take a look. And as appraisers gather more and more data like that, then they can come to better and better conclusions. And one of the things too that we're taking a look at are the warranty years. When we take a look at some depreciation, that's oftentimes the method an appraiser will use as one form of depreciation. They'll say, what's the age over the warranty, the life of it, so to speak, right? Because that's really the only sort of equivalent we would have to life for a solar system. And I would also encourage real estate agents to take a look at the MLS systems they use to make sure the MLS systems have this available in terms of being able to populate certain fields. In this case, related to solar, but not just solar, different energy ratings, all sorts of energy related information. Obviously here we're talking about solar panels, and then of course attaching a lot of the documents we're talking about. So it's accessible because we're not necessarily part of those conversations with the buyers and sellers directly like the agents are. We can call the agents, but also if we have it at our fingertips, we can also analyze data on a larger scale as well. So.
Thank you, Josh. I think those are some great points. Yes, populating the MLS and making documents available as attachments if your MLS offers that. And I do think we forget that the appraiser has access to those documents also, not just the buyers and buyers agents. You also brought up a great question. That's a great segue, Josh. The cost of the system initially will be outlined on the contract when they originally obtained solar. And then you mentioned the current cost. And this brings me to a next question that comes up a lot with solar. Should the solar be paid off before you sell the home? Why or why not? And I'd like to start with Marisa on this one.
Okay, so thank you for that question, Jessica. I'm going to preface that question by saying I am a real estate professional, and I am in California. One of the problems that realtors had with solar years back in California was when their clients went to go and sell their home, and they would have a lease or a lien, something that prevented them from selling their home, or where they had to pay that system off. I got into solar specifically to help clients with ownership. And in the last few years, I've helped clients with ownership of their solar systems. So when you own that solar system versus leasing it, you're able to add some value to the price of your home, to add a little bit of equity to it. It's like any other home improvement project. So it's like if you were to add a pool and then you turn around later, you're going to sell that house and then now it's a pool home. You're not going to get what you paid for the pool, but you are going to get some value for having that home improvement. So solar works the same way when you look at it from an ownership perspective. And then the value is also going to just be based on the market at the time you're selling, how old the system is, and how hot or how desirable the market is at that time. But a solar home does add value when there is ownership. And so when it's done that way, a seller purchased the solar now, say they have a 20-year loan on that solar system. 10 years later, they decide to sell it through escrow. It's usually better for them to pay off the balance of that loan through escrow, so that they can now pass over a free and clear solar system to that new home buyer. When it's done that way, the appraiser is allowed to give some value to that solar system. Okay. So I hope that answered that question.
Yes, those are some great points. I would like to have Pamela answer the question also. And maybe, Pamela, I don't want to put you in the hot seat too much, but maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the different types of solar that buyers are going to encounter. Because sometimes they're going to own it, sometimes they're going to lease it, sometimes they're going to have a power purchase agreement. All three can work, in my opinion, and solar that I've worked with. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot too much asking that question.
No, I think it's a hugely important question. I will say when I teach, sometimes I walk into a room with very hostile people who want to tell me how absolutely horrible solar is for the real estate transaction. And so then we break it down. And what is typically happening is either agents have this experience or they've heard about the experience where someone had a third-party owned system. So there's two ways to pay for a system. You can outright buy it, either with cash or take out a solar loan, or you can have that system through a third party, which is either a lease or a power purchase agreement. If a third party owns the system, just like Marissa said, it doesn't matter if a home buyer finds value in that system. The appraiser is not allowed to take in any sort of contributory value for that system. The real estate transaction is fraught in the best of times. I'm in it right now, and it's fraught. Adding a third-party owned system on top of that transaction can cause other problems. It doesn't mean, just like you said, Jessica, that it can't be a good thing, that it can't work for the homeowner. It just changes the real estate transaction. When you have a homeowner-owned system, you're more likely to pay it off more quickly, really see your return on investment much more quickly, and you can get value for that system. You have the opportunity to get value for that system. I don't want to say it's always going to happen. And I don't know if we'll talk about this more later, but using the income approach to appraising is a good way to try to find some contributory value, because comps can be really difficult to find.
Yes, excellent points. I think we will come back to that. Remind me when we talk about the valuation and the pricing more at the end, but we're kind of dabbling in it already with the different types of ownership. I would, I agree. I think we're all in agreement that the best thing is to own it and own it free and clear. But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes people have a lease. Sometimes they are carrying a balance on the financing, which can be a little tricky to navigate, but it can work. Sometimes buyers are asked to take over payments on a system that's being financed, which might sound crazy, but I just want to point out one thing. When they move into the home, they're going to need electricity, right? So they're probably going to pay the electric company or they're going to pay for their solar. So it's not that different when you look at it that way. Unfortunately, we don't have a lender on the call today, but the thing to keep in mind if they are taking over a payment is that's going to impact lending, and make sure that all those documents are also being copied over to your lender right away. Owned, financing, anything about solar, the lender needs to know too. But hey, if you're going to pay the electric company $200 for electricity for an average home and your solar bill is only $100, win-win, right? I also wanted to touch on something that came up, comparing having solar to a swimming pool. I think it's an excellent comparison. Oh, never mind. We'll come back to that. I lost my train of thought. So embarrassing. But it was an excellent comparison. Maybe I had a brain fart. And Josh, Pamela mentioned something about when a appraiser can and cannot give value to a system regarding whether or not it's owned. Did you want to chime in about that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I immediately I made a quick note right when she said that because I wanted to to kind of re-up that that comment as well. So when we take a look at really what the property is that the appraiser is appraising, and when we take a look at secondary mortgage guidelines like the Fannie Mae Selling Guide, we see that if it's a leased set of panels, or it has the power purchase agreement, then it is not eligible to be included in the appraisal. And really, if you think, and actually, I think Marisa and Pamela mentioned this. I mean, and if you think about this, the appraiser is being asked by the mortgage company or the financial institution to develop an opinion of the market value of the real property. And if it's a leased system, it is not their property. It's leased. It's someone else owns this. So really, it makes sense in that way of thinking, even though it may not be good news to the parties, right? They may not like the news, but then you have a professional agent who knows how to navigate this and knows how to take a look at benefits and things like that. So that's sort of a, just like if we were to see an above ground pool, I'll go back to pool, or we were to see other personal property type items, we're not giving value to that. That's not real property, meaning real estate, right? Real property. So the appraiser can't value that. They can mention it's there, they can talk about it, but it's not included in their value. And I did want to note, I think we've heard a few times about getting the documents to the appraiser, but let's get the documents to the lender as well. And I think that was just mentioned, right? Let's get those documents to the lender so the lender knows what the property is all about. They may not have it on the county record. They may not have, whatever the case is, it's going to be meaningful to them for a few reasons. And one that's close to my heart, of course, as an appraiser, is that they need to know how to assign this to a qualified appraiser. We know there is a special feature. There's this physical characteristic, this relevant characteristic called solar panels. And this appraiser should know how to value it, right? So this is probably something that is going to take a little bit more effort to assign than perhaps others, especially if solar panels aren't overly abundant. If we're not in California, where they evidently lead the country in solar panels, we of course have fewer solar panels, right? And so there's fewer appraisals of solar panels, right? So you might have to work a little harder to find an appraiser who who has that experience, and maybe they're calling up or emailing and saying, we're looking to assign this, but tell me about your solar panel experience and education and things like that.
Thank you, Josh. That's an excellent point. I think we're all in agreement. Share that information with your lender as soon as possible.
And I'd be curious to hear, have there been examples of where lenders just didn't know about it? I don't know, from Marisa or Pamela.
Sorry. Okay, Marisa is raising your hand. Unfortunately, I think we do have some examples. Marisa, do you want to share?
Just really quickly, I literally am going through the same example right now, even here in California. So to Josh's point, letting the lender know, letting the appraiser know up front so that they can assign an appraiser who's familiar with solar or familiar with whatever that feature is great. My husband and I we have a property that we purchased. In that purchase, the solar was paid off by the seller, and we're flipping it and putting it back on the market. Well, we just got our buyer. The first appraiser came in and gave no value for the solar. Okay. And it's a paid off solar system. The lender saw it. We're on the listing side, but the lender saw that and say, hey, that's ridiculous. The lender ordered another appraiser and let them know. The second appraisal came out. The lender paid for the appraisal as well. Second appraisal came out and they gave us the value for the solar because it was a paid off solar system. So that was just a matter of experience between the appraisers. But again, like to Josh's point, you can run into that sometimes. So making sure that everyone is abreast and aware upfront is key, especially when it's a paid off solar system. So yeah, quick point. Going to that right now.
I think we should move into the seller. That's a nice segue into the seller perspective also. Marisa, can you tell us, for getting a listing ready, what are some things that you did as a seller and you would advise your sellers to do?
Okay, so beyond the obvious, put the contract, our MLS, I heard MLS mentioned earlier, it's been updated to where you can actually put the contract in the supplement section. So add those contracts there, make sure all that information provided. We don't, I mean, real, not.
Marisa, we're losing you a little bit. I think we'll come back to you, if that's okay. We're going to come back to you for that same question.
Okay.
Pamela, are you with us?
I think so.
Do you want to take the same question? What would you advise on the seller side that realtors do to get ready for that listing?
I will not have the same depth of knowledge as Marisa, given she's selling solar homes. But what I talk about is for the listing and for the showings and things like that, I would definitely, again, have out the performance monitoring report, because it helps people understand what the benefits are of having that system. And a lot of people are scared of solar. Like that's just a real thing. And don't really understand the full range of benefits that come with it. So I would have that out. I would have warranties out. I would also, as a seller, I would run a calculator that comes up with the contributory value of a system using the income approach. I would also really, really, really try to find a real estate agent who does know how to value and sell solar. I cannot tell you the number of stories I've heard at this point from consumers who say, I want to put my home on the market, and the real estate agent either told me to take the panels off or said there's no value for that. So this is something that's special, and you need a real estate agent like Marisa, like Jessica, who knows how to talk about solar, who knows how to, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but make the benefits shine, and knows the process and the questions to ask as a seller. Because if I had solar, I would be pretty excited about it, and I would want a real estate agent that was excited about it as well.
Those are excellent points. Marisa and I are both green certified realtors. There are a lot of certifications in real estate, and that's just one to look for. And This is a start too, just by being on this call. But if you want to learn more, you can go pretty far down the rabbit hole. So removing the solar panels, I gasped, but I'm glad you brought that up because it does happen that people think about that. And I guess gets back to the swimming pool. That's about the equivalent of filling in a swimming pool. You know, you have an asset that you've added to your house. It might be a $50,000 asset, similar price to a swimming pool, and you're talking about filling it in or removing it. And unlike the swimming pool, a swimming pool, you could live with or without a swimming pool, right? You can't, probably people are not going to be living without electricity in their home. So if you take the panels off, you still got to get your electricity somewhere. Hey, we're going to go back to Marisa in a second too. Pamela, you mentioned a valuation tool, and we have a question from Carol Kibbe. And does this relate? Do you use the PV value tool online? Is it accurate, useful for valuing a home?
Yes. So that's exactly what I said people to if they want to use a free tool. It's pvvalue.com, and it walks agents and appraisers or just homeowners through the process of trying to figure out what the contributory value of a system is based on the income approach to appraising. It asks a lot of questions, but none of them aren't findable or doable. So that's one route to go. There's another organization who has their own calculator. They'll run it for you. If you look at PV value and are a little bit overwhelmed by it, but yes, that's the tool that I actually teach when I teach the solar class is how do you use this tool to come up with the contributory value.
And would you say that the value we're talking about right now is a tool for pricing the property? This is for sellers and realtors.
Exactly, and appraisers.
Okay, we'll let Josh chime in on that too. Josh, would appraisers use that tool?
Yes, I've taken classes actually where they used this tool as demonstration of not just the income approach, discounted cash flow analysis, but also a cost approach as well. And the cost approach, sometimes even when you're talking to people about it, I think actually the cost approach seems to make more sense, if you will. It's maybe more understandable, although I think people can understand the basic concept of the income approach. But the discounted cash flow is a little bit, the math isn't quite as straightforward, if you will. And maybe you disagree, but I just think in terms of, talking to a homeowner, talking to, someone who's maybe just sort of learning about it, maybe the cost approach part is a little simpler. And really, when you take a look, the cost approach really is going to say, okay, what's the cost today? So we did talk about looking at documentation, what was the cost, but really what we're concerned with is what's the value estimate today? So we're going to look at cost today, take off any depreciation based on age over warranty, also thought of as age over life, and then functional depreciation too. So we need to take a look at the market reaction. So if buyers are typically not, let's say they're returning, 20% less than cost, we need to account for that as well. We can't just say, okay, here's the cost. Well, but if the market's not reacting that way, we can't really do that. And the way appraisers can do that is actually take a look at sales that have occurred with solar and run through their cost approach, and they can solve for the solar component and make it fit, so to speak. And then they can figure out, well, what is the depreciation here? So they can look at established sale prices from comps or other solar sales, we could say, and figure out how does the cost calculation make sense. Then we take those conclusions over to the others. And the income approach, I'm not trying to discount that, but that's, we covered that a bit, but taking a look at the income on that pvvalue.com is also there. Cost is also there, but cost, you almost can do it outside of pvvalue.com in some respects as well, although it walks you through. And another idea is appraisers can talk to solar companies in their area. they can learn of the costs. They can learn of it. Now they may have their own sort of interested take on it, right? Because of course they want to sell as many solar systems. But if you get to know folks, you can learn the real costs. You can find real examples. They can talk about installations they've just had. And another great resource, I'll say again, for appraisers is talking to the real estate agents who have sold homes with solar. What was the feedback you got from showings? What would you have priced it without the solar? What comps did you use? That might illuminate on what comps I might use if they're similar enough. So you can learn a lot, especially depending on the data and resources that you have available locally. Sometimes you have very good data. In some other areas, there's very poor data. And so you really need to be talking to a lot of the real estate agents who, pretty much on that sort of front line of experiencing all the different properties out there.
That's a good reminder why we should call back and take a few minutes to talk to those appraisers that call us, even if it's not about our personal listing, right?
Right.
I'd like to come back and talk to Marisa Fletcher again. You there?
I'm here.
Okay, it sounds like we have a better connection now. So you were talking about things that a seller should do to get ready to market and sell a house with solar. Do you want to share some more with us about that?
I do. And I'm gonna put this on the seller and also on the selling agent, whoever that realtor is that's helping them sell the home. When it comes to selling a home with solar on it, you've really got to share the value with the buyers. You've got to share the value of why they would want to buy this home with this solar system. Why would they want to take over a payment, or why would they want to pay more for the property because it has solar on it? I use myself as an example. I've got a home with 2 systems on it. If I were to sell my home, one of my systems is a lease system, the very first one, but I've got a 3,000 square foot single story home where my average bill on a non-summer month was $300. That's a non-summer month. So in California, the summer months are double, right? That cost of that first system, $161 a month. Okay, so just by explaining and showing that benefit, they can already envision the savings that they're getting every year by getting this leased solar system where you're paying extra $160, right? Another example, I then turned around and put a second solar system on the home, an owned system, right? That I put in myself, an owned system. The reason for that is because I have an electric vehicle. Okay, so I can show the benefit of going from paying, $700 to $800 a month in gas in my gas powered car to now I am paying $300 a month and getting all the miles I need, 35,000 miles a year, etc., by having this solar powered home. So it really goes into explaining the benefits, giving examples of the benefits, true examples that people can relate to. Because once I break it down that way, if I were to sell my home, someone would buy it right away, with those panels on it. So that's a very important thing that as realtors, as well as the sellers, we've got to get into explaining those benefits, because buyers don't know. They're coming into a home and they've never had solar before in most cases. So
I think that's a great explanation of sharing the benefits and the real world stories, and they can start to envision themselves in the home too. And you mentioned earlier the true up statement. Would you also recommend that the sellers maybe collect the past 1 to 2 years of their electric statements and just put that in a packet for home buyers to look at?
That's always really helpful. What I recommend, depending on how long that seller's had solar, let me see your bills prior to solar, right? And now let's look at your bill with solar. So you can show a comparison, true apples to apple comparison. Just like I said in my example, $300 on a non-summer month, now $160 paying for my solar panels. So yeah, definitely showing those bills is a big help, because people can just envision it. They already know.
Yeah. And I think that real world buyers, they can really relate to an electric bill. Whether they're in the 40, 50% thinking about solar or not, they know what an electric bill is, and it's very tangible. I'd like to move into the evaluation appraisal section of our talk and kind of how to prepare for that day when the appraiser actually comes to the house. And we've touched on this a little bit. Marisa, what would you recommend is available for the appraiser? Maybe, paper copies at the house, share with them, or even share with them, as Josh mentioned, in the MLS documents. But keeping in mind, maybe not all appraisers are looking at those documents.
Right. We do in our real estate business like we used to do in the past, where we meet appraisers and maybe give them comps or provide them with the information of where we got our comps from. We can always meet the appraiser and give them the solar contract, give them a copy of an old bill and a true up bill. Usually that information is enough. If that appraiser is familiar with solar and how to value solar, they're going to use whatever method they use to value it. But by them knowing that, hey, this is a paid off system or this is a lease system, whichever one, hopefully paid off, they're able to provide that value, and they know that up front. So hopefully you don't have to go through having a second appraisal done on the same property.
Yeah, we want to try and get it right. So talk to your lender, have those things available. And I want to ask everyone, by show of hands, do you try to get comps that have solar on the house? Yeah. Okay.
With the caveat that there aren't that many. It's really hard to find comps. Just for the word on the street is that it's really hard to find comps for solar.
Right. But if you can find them, share them, right?
Unless you're in California.
Yeah, it depends on your market.
Or Texas.
Or Texas.
But you know, it is not it's not always an issue of direct comps with the subject property as well. So if you have put effort into pricing it and doing that research, it is okay to share the research with the appraisers. So just like Marisa said, you know, having that packet on the counter, meeting them there, as long as you're not threatening an appraiser, there is nothing wrong. And as long as you're following your own office protocol, sharing the information. In fact, most appraisers will welcome information from you, because maybe you've done a little bit of legwork for them. They can evaluate it. They can do their own research as well. But you know, you don't necessarily always find that perfect comp for the subject. But what you can do as an appraiser, or perhaps it went into the listing agent's research, is taking a look at properties that have sold with solar, taking a look at other houses perhaps in that property's subdivision, right? So if you know, solar property sold in, you know, subdivision X, look at non-solar properties that sold there and take a look at the market reaction, right? And take a look, okay, and this is for this size system and these specifics about the system. Now, it may not be exactly what we're looking for on the subject, but we can come to conclusions about a solar system that might be slightly different, but we can see what the market reaction is for it. So that's still valuable research, even though it's not identical to what we're looking at. And that is key to an appraiser's research. We're not going to find perfect match sales, right? That's you know, in our dreams, right? But when we do take a look at Fannie Mae Selling Guide, what it tells us is we must use market reaction. We can't merely rely on an income depreciated cost. We can't merely rely on a depreciated cost approach. I think I misspoke, discounted cash flow or depreciated cost. We can't merely rely on those. We have to look at the market reaction. So it's not going to be a perfect comp. It's not going to be a perfect analysis. Those only exist in textbooks. What appraisers can do, though, is come to reliable conclusions and then extrapolate and apply it to this other situation if we don't have that comp. Usually we'll want to include at least one comp, but you know, we're going to have to adjust the other ones that don't have any solar features at all. So we'll have to do the research one way or the other.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, yeah, we've got to work with what we've got. We've got to do the best job we can. I love that you shared, and we have this recorded for all the realtors, that it's okay to share that information with the appraiser. It's okay to meet the appraiser and give them those documents. This is something that comes up related to other things, not just solar. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Certainly. And I'll add too, the income approach and the cost approach, we can almost think of it this way. This maybe isn't a technical way of speaking about it, but it's almost the potential of what it could contribute. Because when it really comes to the end of it, it's how are buyers and sellers acting in the marketplace. So even if a cost approach comes to a conclusion of X dollars, we still have to see, is that actually happening in the marketplace? I want to see that market reaction. And so it may be less, it may be actually identical to what a tool shows us with cost and income approach. So, there's no 100% answer on, well, which tool is going to give me a perfect exact. It really does take into account research and saving that research, because sometimes you can reuse those conclusions, right, and apply it to other similar situations. And it doesn't have to be reinventing the wheel every time. We can build and build and build upon that library of conclusions.
Okay. Josh, back to you. We have a question from our audience, actually from Joan Gregerson. Does the appraiser need to use the energy efficiency building addendum or have a special certification to actually appraise the home with solar?
I'll take the second half of that question. Is there a requirement to have a special certification to appraise a home with solar? And the answer is, in general, no. There is not a, are we looking at a state requirement, federal requirement? There is no such requirement out there. But again, as I said, certain lenders, certain appraisal management companies may be looking to collect that data. Some of them, when they're keeping profiles on appraisers, they'll say, hey, what education do you have? Do you have a green certification or a solar certification? What do you have? What do you have to show for this type of experience? So it's good to keep that in mind, but there is not a requirement per se. As far as this first half there, does an appraiser need to use the energy efficient building addendum? And this is from our friends at the Appraisal Institute. It's a residential green and energy efficient addendum, and it is about 4 pages. There's additional pages of terms, but it's about 4 pages, and it covers just about any sort of energy related improvements that you could have, talking about what types of insulation and so on. Of course, we're talking specifically about solar, and it is asking, is there a battery storage? Is this, leased? Is it owned? And a lot of the questions we're talking about. So I would answer the correct question directly. The appraiser is not required to use that form, but the appraiser should be collecting that type of information. And I would actually encourage real estate agents and other participants to look at that form, complete the applicable sections, and give it to the appraiser, or at least give sort of the equivalent of that information to the appraisers. A lot of the things we've been talking about today. That way, this really does a good outline of listing what is the information an appraiser needs to know in order to follow some of these methods and techniques we're talking about for estimating the value contribution.
Yeah, I think that for those that don't know about this addendum, the green addendum is a hot topic for those of us that are working in green real estate and with solar properties. It's something we all talked about before this call too. And we rarely see it. We've all heard about it, but we don't see it used that often. I'm tempted to chime in and talk about who should use the form and fill it out. I want to actually throw this one to Pamela. Buckstein, do you want to chime in about maybe who should fill out the form and how we feel?
Yeah, I typically recommend that any contractor who's done work on a home that's listed in the green and energy efficient addendum, so high performing upgrades, energy efficient upgrades of some kind, and solar, I would ask my contractor to fill out the bits that relate to them. And then I would X out the rest of it and have the contractor sign and date the addendum. And the truth is that anybody can fill it out. Anybody can fill out the addendum. It's a data collection worksheet. What you're doing is you're collecting data that should be probably a part of the appraisal of the home, because it has all these special upgrades. I typically recommend that real estate agents don't fill it out just in case they get something wrong. We just don't want any liability concerns there. unless you're, if you could be very confident and know exactly what you're doing, and that's great. But in general, I suggest that real estate agents don't fill it out. But really, a contractor, the appraiser can fill it out, the homeowner can fill it out. It's just a data collection form so that it's all there. But then what you really, really, really want to do, quick plug, is make sure as a listing agent that if your MLS has green and solar data fields, that you add that data to the MLS, to those data fields, because those data fields are then searchable, and that's how we find comps, amongst other things. But the data fields are searchable. And the good news is that the people up on high, the Appraisal Institute and the Real Estate Standards Organization, they work together to make sure that the data collection fields that are in the green and energy efficient addendum are data matched to the latest, newest data fields that are in the Real Estate Standards Organization's data dictionary. So, and those are even data matched to MISMO, which is the Mortgage Industry Standards something organization. They all work together to make sure that they are collecting the data in the same way, which is super, super exciting.
Thank you. I got a little technical, but I think the good news is the data fields are matching across different industries, and at least we know what we're working with. We have a ton of questions pouring in from the audience. I want to thank everyone for so much participation today. It's wonderful. We knew this would be a hot topic, and no pun intended. We may have to have Solar Education 2.0. I want to go to some of these questions because I think some people have some similar questions. Becky asks, if there is a loan balance due for a solar system at the time of purchase, won't the new lender require that be paid off before closing? And I want to focus on, won't the new lender require that it's paid off before closing? And I just want to go ahead and answer that one. Not necessarily. This can cause some issues if their DTI is borderline, because it's kind of like they're buying a house with a large payment. Well, not so large. It's the same as your electric bill in a lot of cases, but it's kind of like we tell people don't go buy a car. They're kind of buying a little car that goes along with the house, only it's attached to the roof and it makes energy. Sorry if that was kind of corny. So the lender will not require that, but you tell your lender right away to make sure it's not going to cause a hiccup in the loan. If it's going to cause a hiccup, then you got to have a conversation, buyer, seller. Seller could pay it off if they're in a position to do that. Sometimes the seller can, sometimes they can't. Also related, this is what I really want to dig into. Shannon asks, if the solar loan can be transferred to the buyer since it's a lien, would it need to be paid off? Oh, she asked about paid off too. Okay. The loans can, in most cases, be transferred. And Marisa, do you want to speak on this? Do you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. I think you were right on the same path where I would have went. But like you were saying, Jessica, the loans can be transferred in most cases. Usually we see those with a lease or a PPA option where they're going to transfer that loan, or the seller can pay them off. The seller can choose to pay them off. When the seller owns the system or they have an ownership model, it's more beneficial for the seller to pay it off because they get a little bit more value for it. So it all depends on what type of how the original system was purchased, and that'll dictate what has to happen at the time of sale.
Thank you. I think we really drove that home. Hey, we have been talking for an hour already. Can you believe it? I would like to go around and ask each of our panelists to share one or two things that you hope the realtors can take with them today. Maybe that hope that you learned or feel a little more comfortable with solar today. Marisa, do you want to start us off?
Sure thing. I want to start off the first thing that I always like to share with realtors. Solar is not bad. Okay. Just like realtors are not bad. It's all about setting the proper expectations with the clients. And then that's how you know what's the best option for the client. Every client's going to be different. Okay. But solar is not bad as a whole. I would love our realtors to adopt solar into their business, into their platform, because by 2030, we want 30% we want everything to be powered 30% by solar by 2030. So we're going to be seeing more and more homes with solar. They anticipate by 2030, 15% of the single family residences are going to have solar by 2030. So please adopt it, get versed on solar, how it works, partner up with other solar professionals. But solar is a good thing. That's the biggest takeaway that I want to give to real estate professionals.
Thank you. Pamela, what would you like people to take with them home today to real estate?
There is a real business opportunity here. And it's weird to say, but you would be very much ahead of the trend of real estate agents that are building this knowledge into their business. And I recommend when you start to feel comfortable about talking about the difference between third-party ownership and owned, when you start to feel comfortable, you've read some of the research that's out there and how to talk about solar, that you start marketing that. Because people really, really are looking for realtors that know how to protect their best interest. But seriously, add it to your marketing, because there's a lot of opportunity out there.
I think that's a great point. And in some markets, 40 to 50% of homeowners are looking for this. So we need to match that pace. Josh, what do you hope people take with them today?
I hope the takeaway is communication. I mean, because everything we've been talking about has been communication, whether it's meeting the appraiser at the property, whether it's talking with your sellers and buyers about the realities of this and what information we have or we need, whether it is, saving the research you have and sharing that with other participants so they understand where are we coming up with these conclusions. I really think that's one of the biggest takeaways, not just for this, but for really anything that we go into as real estate professionals. So, and then really linking that with the data that we're making available, right? Because it's not always talking that we're talking about, right? That's not always that communication. We're also talking about data in the MLS, data in the appraisal forms, all of this. So really overall communicating the information, because in the end, other real estate agents won't see the data. They won't be able to come to any conclusions if it's not in the MLS, if it's not being shared. Appraisers can't come to accurate conclusions if we don't have that data. So really housing it somewhere and sharing the information and sharing through all sorts of communication is probably the biggest takeaway.
I think that's wonderful. And that's a big part of what we're doing today, to have this conversation and share information. And that's a perfect segue, Josh. I want to encourage everyone to keep this communication and this conversation going, because we had more questions than we could get to today. If it comes back by popular demand, we'll do this again. But the questions in the chat, we can keep the chat going in our workplace group, and keep the chat going on the YouTube channel also. I'd also like to share how to contact our panelists today in case you want to have a one-on-one conversation and keep that conversation going. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. I'm so excited that we had such a variety of perspectives come, and gosh, the time just flew by. So on this sheet, you can see everybody, a little bit about what they do and their website, how to contact and keep that conversation going. I also want to say thank you to eXp CAN, Climate Action Network Group. If you are a member or a staff person at eXp, please think about joining us. You can follow our workplace group. You can get involved. I want to thank eXp One and also eXp University. A lot of people behind the scenes help us bring these great videos to you. And then I want to give a shout out to our next event happening in April. April is Earth Month, and happy Earth Day, everyone. On Saturday, it was Earth Day. Our next event will be happening in eXp World, and it's our Earth Month reflections. We had a lot of great webinars. book club this month, and this is a chance to sit by our campfire at the campsite in the World. So make sure you go in the World and look for Forest Campsite, okay? And that's happening Friday, this Friday the 28th, 8 a.m. Pacific time. So that concludes our talk today. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much. This was great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.